As work on Heart of China continued through 1990, Jeff Tunnell's attention was already shifting toward a very different kind of project. If Rise of the Dragon had explored cyberpunk noir and Heart of China classic adventure cinema, the next game would attempt something even more ambitious: an interactive cartoon. Tunnell joined forces with artist Brian Hahn and animator Sherry Wheeler, a veteran of Disney and Filmation Studios, to explore the idea of combining traditional hand-drawn animation with the interactivity of adventure games. Early concepts centered around the everyday world of a mischievous 9-year-old boy, blending suburban childhood with exaggerated cartoon humor and imagination. Despite Dynamix's growing experience with cinematic adventures, the project presented an entirely new challenge. Creating what amounted to a playable animated film required merging classical animation techniques with cutting-edge computer technology, along with an entirely different production pipeline than anything the company had attempted before. Former NBC and Family Home Entertainment writers Tony and Merle Perutz were brought in to write the screenplay, collaborating with Tunnell, Dave Sell, and Tom Brook on the game's puzzles, dialogue, and characters. Sean Sharp, who had joined Dynamix in 1990 following work in television and commercial art, was appointed art director and tasked with shaping the game's visual identity. To help realize the ambitious production, Wheeler assembled a team of artists and animators with backgrounds in traditional animation. Among them was Pat Clark, known for his work on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, who became animation director. Renee Garcia, whose credits included The Little Mermaid, Scooby-Doo, and The Flintstones, along with Sharp and Brent Burkett, handled the game's hand-painted backgrounds. Unlike the digitized actor approach used in Heart of China, every frame of animation in the new project was drawn by hand. 7 full-time animators worked at light tables, creating black and white animation cells, which were then digitally captured and colored using Electronic Arts' deluxe paint animation software. The painted backgrounds were scanned into the computer and combined with the animated characters to create scenes that closely resembled a Saturday morning cartoon brought to life. It was an enormously labor-intensive process. Production stretched across more than a year, with nearly 40 people contributing to the game. Tunnell personally oversaw much of the work, ensuring that the animation, writing, and gameplay all aligned with the studio's growing cinematic ambitions. The game follows Willy Beamish, a mischievous 9-year-old with an overactive imagination and a remarkable talent for finding trouble. School is finally out for summer, and Willy's only real concern is winning the Nintari Championship, a video game competition that, in his mind, represents glory itself. But everyday life rarely goes according to plan. Between school bullies, humiliating punishments from his neurotic father, arguments with his yuppie mother, and constant battles with his bratty younger sister, Willy's summer quickly spirals into disaster. Alongside his loyal pet frog Horny and the neighborhood friends who gather in the treehouse, Willy finds himself swept into a bizarre conspiracy involving a sinister businesswoman, a toxic waste scheme, his father's new job, and the town of Frumpton, slowly descending into chaos. Unlike the romanticized world of Heart of China, or the bleak future of Rise of the Dragon, Willy Beamish grounded its story in exaggerated suburban Americana, mixing cartoon humor with satire aimed at modern parenting, consumer culture, and small-town politics. The player's choices once again shaped how events unfolded. Dialogue decisions, puzzle solving, chores, and everyday responsibilities all influenced Willy's relationships with family members, school officials, and the eccentric residents of Frumpton. Central to the game was the trouble meter, a running measure of Willy's behavior that could ultimately land him in military school. Failure often came not through death or danger, but through the frustrations of childhood itself. Losing privileges, being grounded, missing opportunities, or disappointing the people around him. Even within its exaggerated cartoon world, Willy Beamish captured something recognizable about growing up. When the game was released for IBM PCs in the summer of 1991, it achieved both critical and commercial success, selling roughly 80,000 copies within its first 6 months. Reviewers were captivated by its vibrant cartoon graphics and fluid animation, praising its sharp satire of American suburbia, television culture, and dysfunctional family dynamics. Though some criticized its unforgiving design, the game's success was undeniable, leading to versions for the Commodore Amiga and Macintosh the following year. Work also quickly began on a CD-ROM version focused primarily on voice acting. Actors, including several Dynamix employees, were cast to voice the game's 42 characters, but synchronizing dialogue with the animation proved more complicated than expected, requiring significant portions of the original code to be rewritten. When the CD version arrived in 1992, reception was more divided. While some appreciated the added voices, others criticized both the performances and the game's tonal direction. In Computer Gaming World in 1993, reviewer Charles Ardai wrote, "The smirking adolescent sexiness goes hand in hand with the self-indulgent, immature performances of the actors, which are no better than what one might expect from a high school drama club." The following year, a Sega CD version was released, though the system's limited color palette resulted in noticeably washed-out visuals. Loading times also drew criticism, with some reviewers joking that players could learn a new language while waiting for Willy to move from one screen to the next. By then, however, events inside Dynamix were already reshaping the company's future. Back in the summer of 1991, The Adventures of Willy Beamish was showcased at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago, just months before reaching store shelves. The game quickly became one of the most talked-about titles in Dynamix's lineup, with many within the industry predicting it would become one of the studio's biggest successes. Confidence was high enough that work soon began on a sequel, The Further Adventures of Willy Beamish, which would have followed Willy into his teenage years. But by this point, Sierra Online's partnership had transformed Dynamix. What had once been a small company willing to take risks had grown into a team of more than 100 employees, capable of producing projects on a scale unimaginable only a few years earlier. But the new era brought new challenges. The cinematic adventures had earned critical acclaim and strong sales, yet their growing complexity demanded ever larger teams, longer development cycles, and significant financial investment. At the same time, Sierra increasingly encouraged Dynamix to focus on simulation games, an area where the company had excelled since its inception. Jeff Tennell, meanwhile, had begun to feel the strain of overseeing large-scale productions. Longing for the smaller, experimental environment that had defined Dynamix's early years, he established Jeff Tennell Productions, just a few blocks from the company's main offices. As Dynamix's priorities shifted, The Further Adventures of Willy Beamish never progressed beyond its earliest stages. Rise of the Dragon, Heart of China, and The Adventures of Willy Beamish each explored a different style, setting, and tone, yet all shared the same goal: pushing adventure games closer to film while preserving the interactivity that made them games. Together, they remain some of the most distinctive and ambitious titles of their era, a remarkable trilogy that helped redefine what cinematic storytelling in games could be. Today, more than 3 decades later, the work of Jeff Tennell and the exceptionally talented people at Dynamix continues to stand as a testament to what can happen when creativity, technology, and ambition meet at the right moment.